I've got something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? Something in my front pocket for you. Why don't you reach on in my pocket and see what it is? Then grab onto it, it's just for you. Give it a little squeeze and say, how do you do? There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket. There's something in my front pocket.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Talk Gaming. My apologies for this episode going up about 12 to 18 hours late. Essentially what's going on is we're having our cabinets replaced and the dude that's doing it has to rip out all the old ones and it's incredibly loud. Like so loud, I've had to stop filming probably 4 or 5 videos just because even this close proximity mic could be heard. So just disclaimer, in case there's loud noises, I'll try to pause or whatever, but that's what it is. They're replacing cabinets and structurally integral parts of our house. So it's just part of the fun. It's part of the fun. Keeps me on my toes. But this week we've got some fun topics, fun things to discuss. This week is going to be much less political than the last one. I do apologize for last week's episode. It was just weird. It was weird. There were only like 3 topics discussed. They were incredibly ranty, highly political. I apologize for that. I just wanted to get it off my chest, I guess. I was all alone that weekend, so I didn't have anyone to rant to. But this week we got some interesting news, some interesting discussions, and things that I think are relevant. We're also going to take some questions from you guys on Twitter, which again is a good reference if you guys ever want to ask me any questions and have them answered, either in an extra or on the show. Just tweet at LukeStevensTV, and I can read them off on the show and we can reference it. But yeah, let's get into it. First tidbit of news from this week. This was early in the week, but the new anti-tampering technology Denuvo, I think is how they want it pronounced, Denuvo, whatever it is, sounds fancy. This was the built-in anti-hacking software in Resident Evil 7, and it was millions of dollars of research and tech to implement this thing, and it was cracked in less than 5 days. And there was a big press release, and it was this big thing like, oh crap, the latest version of Denuvo was cracked in 5 days. Oh well. The problem with this for Denuvo and for these developers like Capcom is that once one of these things is cracked, it's cracked for basically everything that employs this type of tech. Now, Denuvo is interesting because the way that it binds and uses polynomial division and everything makes it so they can tweak some stuff and then you have to re-solve it. So it will probably take another few days. But once they've solved it, they kind of know what they're looking for, the pirates that is. So it's a problem for Denuvo, but nonetheless, they seem to have made it 5 days, which is considered, strangely, a success in the software protection, especially gaming industry, because those first few days is when you really want to be careful, especially with a game like Resident Evil 7, which everyone is playing and everyone's talking about, so you don't want to allow it to be pirated super easily in those first few days, because it's one of those games where after the first 2 or 3 weeks everyone's played it, and so for you to try and play it, you're behind the curve. You know, you're lame. You're lame. That's what you are. So they consider this a success, actually. And I read Denuvo's statement, and they're like, yeah, we're disheartened that it was solved and cracked, but you know, we worked hard on it and we made it 5 days and we're proud of that. Like, okay, you're really looking on the bright side of things. Your multi-million-dollar software thing was, or tech that's meant to protect software was cracked in 5 days, but that's 5 days. That is a while when you've got probably thousands of people working nonstop to try and crack it. So all in all, I guess it is impressive it made it that long. overall, these anti-tampering things and software DRM type tech, it's incredibly complicated and incredibly just, it's technologically very impressive that they could even last more than a couple hours, because they have to interweave all the files and then do checks back, and it's just complicated. It's complicated. So I'm not going to pretend like I really understand it, but nonetheless, it was cracked in less than 5 days. Now, this has happened before with certain games. I think Dead Rising 3, maybe. I think it was that one. I think they had their DRM, whatever, anti-tampering tech cracked within like a couple days, and they actually patched it out because it was causing a bunch of stutters and sluggishness anyways. So they just cut it out and said, okay, you guys already figured it out, we'll just take it out, fine, whatever. And I don't know, as of the time of this recording, I have not personally heard whether or not they've patched it out of the game, but nonetheless, it was cracked. It was cracked. Very sad day for Denuvo, but I think probably a good day for gamers, just because they get it potentially patched out of the game, so it'll run even better than it already does, which is very well. And that's another thing. Resident Evil 7, pretty impressive launch. I mean, pretty impressive launch. They didn't really have any big issues, any game-breaking bugs or anything. I think a lot of that is attributed to their brand new RE engine that they built specifically for this game, which again is, I made a video on this earlier in the week. I think it says something about really taking care of your engine first and foremost, because that's the foundation for everything else. So when you approach your engine first and foremost, you get everything set, then the foundation and the framework is there so that you can actually build it up and not have a buggy mess at launch or at any other period. And of course, there's ways to do it which are unhealthy. The Order 1886 was an example of a game that was beautiful, that spent so much time on their engine, but they forgot to focus on gameplay or on story or on even the length of the game. And so you ended up with, I think it was like 3 hours or something. Or maybe it was 8. I don't know. Either way, it was very short. It was a very, very short game. I never finished it. Thankfully, I didn't buy it. I borrowed it from a friend. Sucker. But overall, I think you can. I mean, too much of anything, of any good thing, is a bad thing. Too much focus on your engine, which is a good thing, can lead to screwing up and not having good gameplay or a good story or anything like that. And I don't think it's necessarily about manpower, but it's also about priorities. The Order 1886 was sold on its graphics. It was a beautiful, beautiful game. People said, that looks beautiful, that looks interesting, I'm gonna get it. They got it. It wasn't fun. With this Resident Evil, they seem to have balanced it out. They got the PlayStation VR running just fine on it, and it works really well. They have an exclusive thing signed for a year with PlayStation, so after that year is up, then you'll be able to play it with I think the Vive, maybe the Oculus 2. I have not heard any specifics on that, again, because it's not available for a year at least, so I don't know. But either way, Resident Evil 7, it's a stressful, creepy game. And as somebody who really likes Outlast, I think I've played through Outlast probably 4 or 5 times, once on the Nightmare difficulty. Don't recommend it. I like these types of survival horror games, but they are things that I can only do some of. I can't do these games consistently and steadily. I need myself a break every once in a while. And so I have not finished Resident Evil 7. I have played a little bit of it. I do have the demo also. And in general, it's a fun game. It's a interesting thing. I think Outlast 2 is going to have a lot to compete with. I am worried about Outlast 2, though, because Outlast 2 seems to be a very, I don't know, from the gameplay they showed in like the cornfield and all that, when you're stepping on like dead babies and stuff, on the corpses of dead babies, and then there's like the upside down crosses and everything's burning, and then, you know, they're just hacking people. It reminded me a lot of Outlast, because it's always been a very grotesque and horrifying experience, but I'm worried that they're just going to be focused on trying to outdo the first game in gore and in kind of evil satanic imagery, and just like, okay, what would be the most disturbing thing we could show? Forcing the player to walk on dead babies and hearing the crunch when you do. Okay, yeah, let's do that. I'm worried that that's what it's going to be like. I think true horror is nuanced and isn't just shoving it down your throat. It's very carefully kind of woven into the world and into the experience. I'm worried, based on what I saw, that it's just going to be shock value horror, which would be disappointing, to say the very least. But we'll try it. We'll try it when the game comes out. I'll do a gameplay video if you guys want to of Outlast 2. I think it could be interesting. But I am skeptical nonetheless. Healthy skepticism cannot hurt. The next thing I want to talk about is Red Dead Redemption 2, actually. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that is incredibly exciting. Looks beautiful. If you've not seen the new trailer, go ahead while you're listening to this, pull it up. There's no dialogue or anything, so it's just gameplay and footage, but you can actually look it up right now while you're listening. It is a beautiful, beautiful game. Rockstar steadily has some of the most beautiful games out there, at launch at least, and I mean, they put everyone to shame. They spend like 5 or 6 years developing these big open world games, and then they put one out and you're just like, holy hell, you guys are freaking amazing. And I think that's the big thing. I think it was somebody from Ubisoft. It was like their chief technical officer or somebody like that. And he was asked, like, what company's model do you admire? And I believe they were talking about Assassin's Creed at the time. And he said, well, we really like the Rockstar model, or business model, because how they do it is they don't say, hey, we're going to put out a new Grand Theft Auto every 3 or 4 years. We're going to try to improve on what we did in the last one and do this. He said, no, they don't do that. They say, okay, we have 5 years to make a game. We're going to make it another Grand Theft Auto, but we're not just going to make another Grand Theft Auto. We're going to make the best game ever made. That is going to still be like number 4 on Steam's most played list and best like sales list, even 3 years after launch. That's what we want. And sure enough, they're doing it. They're doing it. And I think Ubisoft is learning from them. I think other studios are learning from them, because gamers much prefer one game every 3 or 4 years that is groundbreaking and incredible, like Grand Theft Auto 5 was. It's still being played. They make hundreds of millions of dollars every year off of Grand Theft Auto Online alone. And it's just a money-making machine, really. And gamers love it. It's a money-making machine because gamers love it. It's an incredible game. It just is. I mean, I don't think that that's a controversial thing to say. But the Red Dead Redemption 2, it's set to come out fall of this year, fall of 2017, which is exciting. It's sneaking up real soon. I would expect to see some sort of... this is a prediction. It's not really a groundbreaking prediction, but nonetheless, I'm making it. I've heard other people say the same thing, so I guess that it's just something in the air. I would expect to see actually a trailer during the Super Bowl of Red Dead Redemption 2. I would honestly expect to see it. A lot of people have been saying, well, no, they're going to wait till E3. It's more gamer-oriented. Well, people who play Grand Theft Auto 5, I wouldn't consider necessarily only hardcore gamers or only the gamers that are going to be watching E3 closely. Most of the people that I know that really enjoy Grand Theft Auto 5 online, even now to this day, don't consider themselves hardcore gamers. And I think the exposure from the Super Bowl would be a beautiful time to do it. Super Bowl, if you're not familiar, is the American football big championship, like universe championship, whatever, of football. Not soccer, but football. And it happens once a year, usually in February. And it's this weekend, I think. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's next weekend. Might be tomorrow. I don't know when it is. I don't know when it is. I've not been following it this closely. I think it's between Atlanta and New England. My guess is New England's going to win. Tom Brady is a monster. But anyway, I would expect to see a trailer or something during the Super Bowl. There were all sorts of leaks and things that suggested that they might be working on a, like, people looking at receipts and travel history from employees at Rockstar, and they're like, see, so this could line up with a Super Bowl reveal of gameplay. I didn't look at that stuff. I'm just going with my gut, and I say if I were a Rockstar executive, I would say the Super Bowl, I think, would be a worthwhile time to announce it. Millions and millions, tens of millions, I think well over 100 million even, possibly, in total would see that trailer as a result of posting it during the Super Bowl. So really, I think it would be a slam dunk. I would expect to see something during the Super Bowl if you're a Red Dead fan. But even if they don't do that, I would expect it at E3 or some other conference coming up. I mean, we don't know a whole lot about the gameplay. We don't know a whole lot about the game itself. We're guessing that it's a prequel. We're guessing you're going to see some of the characters from the first game. Some of the leaks we've seen have said that you're going to be doing the same kind of thing with Grand Theft Auto 5, where you're going to be switching between like 3 characters, which again is such a weird concept to do during, like, with an open world type game. It's very weird to think like, oh, we'll have 3 playable characters and you'll switch between them at any time that you want. It could be really cool. That's an incredibly difficult thing to pull off, mind you. It's incredibly difficult to pull that off. And the fact that they seem to do it so effortlessly is quite impressive. But seemingly, from what we've heard from certain leaks, it looks like the same thing is going to be done with Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, some of the big controversy around Red Dead Redemption 2 was that they aren't currently set for a PC release. It looks like maybe they'll release it on PC a year later, kind of like what they did with Grand Theft Auto, or not at all. Red Dead Redemption never came out on PC, and people have been waiting for a remastered version on PC, whatever, which you might get, but I would not count on it. But people are like, why would they blow off the PC community? That's so weird. They're throwing away money. What are they doing? Well, I looked up some of the sales from PC compared to the consoles, and I just wanted to see, are they really throwing away that much money compared to what they could make by just focusing on the consoles? Because again, there's always a trade-off. People will say, well, why doesn't Naughty Dog develop for the Xbox One and PC, come out with Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Remastered and The Last of Us Part 2 on PC and Xbox One? Why don't they do that? Well, because those games wouldn't look as good as they do if they were trying to release for every platform. They wouldn't be able to focus on the engine specifically for a certain set of hardware. They would be just in general, everything would get more complicated and it wouldn't work as well, and they wouldn't be the same games. Some of the stuff that you can do in Uncharted 4, you can only do on the PS4. You could also do it on PC, but if you're going to release it on PC, you probably need to also release it on Xbox One, especially with Windows' new and Microsoft's new policies on play everywhere, whatever. So it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. And if Rockstar can focus just on 2 possibilities, the Xbox and the PlayStation, then they have a set market. They have a very large majority of the gaming market. And it would be easier for them to focus the engine and focus all of that stuff and all their resources, which is something that obviously has worked for them in the past with Grand Theft Auto 5. It clearly seems to work for them. Now, as for the sales numbers, and sorry if I'm like itching my wrist a lot, we were having issues with static in the last few episodes, where I think what it was is I would like touch the metal stand, and then it, like on the carpet, my feet are building up static, and I pass that static onto the mic, so you end up with this crackling, and it's just a mess. So I pulled out one of my static discharge bands that I use when I'm working on my PC, and I have it hooked up and grounded, so I'm hoping that will just dissipate all the static, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. If it does, then awesome. If it doesn't, then oh well. I would have hooked it to my ankle, but my ankle is too big for the strap to wrap around, so I thought of that. I thought of that, but I didn't. So it's very uncomfortable. It's almost like they don't expect you to wear it while filming a podcast. That's weird. Anyway, the sales numbers. We're looking at GTA 5 on PC. Sold roughly 2 million copies. And of course, it's constantly building and building and building, and it's constantly getting better and better. I think that's within the first month or two. But it still has sold probably since that was reported millions of copies. Now, on console, they sold 11.2 million copies. And this is, again, is for GTA 5. 11.2 million copies in the first 24 hours. Setting a huge record for not only initial release, but total sales. That's so far out ahead of anybody else. It's insane. And then they've sold an estimated 45 million copies and shipped an estimated 45 million copies to retailers, which doesn't even include sales from like the Xbox Live store or PlayStation, the PlayStation store. So that's, I mean, they probably have sold 50 plus million copies of Grand Theft Auto 5. Which is mind-blowing. Skyrim, which is like one of the best-selling games of all time, is around 20 million. And it's just insane to think that they've sold close to 50 million copies. It makes sense. I mean, I've probably owned 2 or 3 copies. I think 2. We had it for our Xbox, and then we also had it for our, or I also have it on Steam. So I guess I bought 2 copies. So sorry. I'm double dipping. But with this, I mean, you look at the total thing, 11.2 million sales in the first 24 hours on consoles, and PC after a few months is at 2 million copies. So, and that's after delaying the release for a year. So really, I think for them, they're looking at it, they're like, if we delay it by a year to release it on PC, they're going to buy it anyways. They're still buying it. It's still one of the best-selling games on Steam. So why would we, why would we shoot ourselves in the foot and lengthen the development time and all this when we could just not? When we could not. We could release the game on consoles and then spend a year developing maybe like VR support and then also really refining the PC release. Almost essentially just working on a PC version, aside from patches, which you have like a little team set to do on the console side of things. Really, I have no problem with it because what it does, people are always complaining about crappy PC ports and they say, oh, well, this was ham-fisted and this wasn't done very well. What are you doing? But then somebody like Rockstar says, okay, well, we're going to release this for consoles, get a good chunk of change, and we're going to spend a year or so working on a PC version for you guys. And when it comes out, it'll work. It'll be really good. It'll run smoothly, and you will buy it for years to come. And everyone's like, no, how dare you? That's anti-consumer and all this. They're giving you what you want. It's just delayed. Now, of course, there is the reality that we don't know for sure if Red Dead Redemption 2 will ever come out on PC. My guess would be that they will this time around. I think they just decided it wasn't worth the trouble of trying to commit the team to it this time around, or with the original Red Dead. But I would expect it to come out on PC this time around, because still 2 million copies on PC within the first few months is a lot. That's a good chunk of change at full price. Online sales through Steam or whatever, when you're keeping 70+%. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So my guess would be you're going to see the same thing. It releases for consoles fall, maybe October of 2017. And then you're going to see a huge release on PC, probably the following summer or fall of 2018, which I would be okay with. And I know it's mean of me to say that because I do have a PS4 and I can do that. Thank you again to the viewer who sent it to me. But I really just, I'm going to get a PC port that's going to be better and more impressive and solid and stable than what I would get on day one. And it's going to look better. It's going to run better. I get what I want. It's a win-win. I just have to wait a little while. Plus, there's going to be lots of other games that come out this year that are going to occupy your time if you're a PC-only player. So I think we'll survive, but In an ideal world, it would run perfectly on all systems on day one. It's not an ideal world. In this world, I'm glad to get it at all, or, I mean, really, that's it. I'm just glad to get another Red Dead. That's that. Another thing I want to talk about was something that happened January 23rd at 1:22 a.m. in the morning. I actually have been trying to get more active on Twitter, and so I've been following like Neil Druckmann, some other gaming specific guys, big gaming figures, trying to follow them a little more closely and do all of that. Another reason why you should check me out on Twitter. But Neil Druckmann, he has a Twitter account. He's the head creative director at Naughty Dog. He was the creative director for Uncharted 4 and for The Last of Us, and he is, from all accounts, doing the creative directing and the gameplay directing for The Last of Us Part 2. It doesn't look like Bruce Straley is going to be helping out with it. It's possible he will be, but it's also possible he won't be. We don't know for sure what's going on in the company with regard to that. But this tweet, I got a screenshot of it before the initial poster was forced to delete his account because he was getting so much crap from social justice warriors, as they are called apparently. So, Neil Druckmann, he was tweeted at Christoph Cohen said, at Neil Druckmann, "The Last of Us is my favorite game of all time. Please try to keep your personal politics out of Part 2. Thank you very much." Not controversial. Not a controversial question. He's simply asking, listen, man, I love The Last of Us, but I don't want it to turn into a political preach fest. I don't want it to turn into this thing where all of a sudden the butch cut chain gang BuzzFeed androgynous lesbian Ellie comes out and starts making out with everybody, and you know, then it turns out that Joel had a sex change operation and is now like Joella or something, and then all of a sudden like it switches and the zombie outbreak are actually a bunch of Trump supporters, and then it's like, oh, we have to fight. Nobody wants that. And that's all he's saying. He's saying, listen, we all have personal politics. We all have things that we believe, we don't believe, that we think are awesome, intelligent, and things that we think are stupid and irrelevant. But with this, he's just asking, don't politicize it. Just tell the story, to be like, have the characters. Let's just keep it simple, stupid. Like, let's just do that. Why do we have to make it into a political thing? Whether you are hardcore on the right or hardcore on the left or somewhere in the middle, just why can't we just keep it a story? Keep it simple. And Neil Druckmann responded, no can do. Writers work off of their views of the world. For example, the ending of The Last of Us is very much inspired by my, quote, personal politics. And this was shared all around. It was everywhere, seemingly. I retweeted it as well. Because I think it brings up an interesting question. Can you have a game like The Last of Us, a game like just, well, really any sort of narrative, whether it's in gaming or in video game, or in gaming or in film or TV or music, can you have anything that isn't political that's truly moving? Hamilton, the musical, is a highly political piece. Very, very well done and very interesting, but highly political. One of my favorite plays of all time. Oh, maybe I can grab it. Let me grab it. We have the technology. I'm going to show you. It is. Yeah, I found it. This is A Bright New Boise. Let me put back in my IV looking thing. Hopefully this is working. Hopefully there's not a lot of crackle. If there is, I'm going to have a conniption. But this play, I starred in it. If you're familiar with the show, or if you want to look it up and you like plays, you like really intense narratives that are thought-provoking and inspiring and beautiful and everything like that. I'm not a salesman, if you can tell. Bright New Boise, I played Alex in this, and it was my first real professional show, and it is intense. It is a very intense story. It's about a man. I can read the back of it. You can read the description. We have the technology. Here we go. A disgraced evangelical from northern Idaho takes a job at a Hobby Lobby franchise in Boise, Idaho, in order to reconnect with an estranged son. Yours truly. But as his fellow employees begin to uncover dark secrets from his past, and his son becomes increasingly interested in his reasons for leaving his church, he must choose whether or not to have a normal life and a healthy relationship with his son, or hold on to the beliefs that have given his life meaning. That's intense, and that it's not a great summation, but basically the man is forced to choose between everything he's believed for his entire life or living what many people would consider to be a normal life or a healthy life. He can choose between reconnecting with his son or shedding or reconnecting with his son and shedding everything he's ever believed in, or holding to what he believes in, but possibly losing his son forever. And it's an intense thing. The last scene is incredibly intense. If you're interested, I highly recommend it. You can get these things for like $10. Read them, perusal script version. It's amazing. I love the show. But it's a very political piece. It's a very political piece. I mean, even there, it's set in the Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobbies, for some reason, are considered a very, very controversial place because it's a Christian-owned company, and they got a lot of news. And when they were asked under the Affordable Care Act, they were required to provide contraceptives and things to their employees under federal law for the Affordable Care Act. And they said, well, no, we consider those things to be morally reprehensible. We don't want to provide our employees with that. Most of our employees don't even want that. So we're just not going to do it. And they said, okay, well, we're going to fine you. And Hobby Lobby said, okay. And so Hobby Lobby for months took millions of dollars worth of fines, and it's considered a very controversial topic for whatever reason. But it's set in Hobby Lobby. It is asking a father figure to essentially shed this kind of hyper fundamentalist version of Christianity that he started to hold to, what many people would consider to be a cultish version. He's asked to completely shed it or lose the only person he has left in the world that he only has recently rediscovered. It's a very political show, and it's an intense show. When my parents came to see it, my sister came to see it. So basically all my friends came to see it because, like I said, it was my first real professional show. And after the show, they were all in the parking lot sobbing. My sister and like two of her closest friends that she brought also. After the show, they came up, they hugged me, they said, you know, great job. They're still kind of sobbing because the ending is very sad. And they went in their car and apparently sat there for like 15 minutes and just cried. They cried, and they were trying to call me, but I was backstage and doing things. I was shaking hands and everything. So I didn't see my phone, but they were calling me. They're like, I just want to make sure he's okay, because that was so intense. That's what a truly moving story does, but it's an incredibly political piece. So if you took all politics out of these stories, they would lose their grit. They'd lose that element of reality that holds them together. Now, it can also be abused. Don't get me wrong, it can also be abused, but it can be abused in the eye of the beholder. So with something like, for instance, the Left Behind DLC for The Last of Us. Spoiler alert, I suppose. For the Left Behind DLC, you find out that Ellie is gay and is seemingly a lesbian. I didn't think that it was that was necessarily the moral of the story, but Neil Druckmann nonetheless came out and said, no, she is a lesbian. We found that out in the DLC, and I was like, oh, I didn't take it as that, but you wrote the damn thing, so I guess you're right. But nonetheless, we find out that she likes her women folk, and some people viewed that as, well, yes, that's a political thing, that's realistic, but it does seem that you're using her as a tool to make some sort of statement, which I don't have necessarily any problems with, but many people did. And one of the ways that they do this is by getting you to kind of fall in love with these characters, somebody like Ellie, and then they do this twist where they say, oh, well, here's a controversial thing about them, apparently being gay is controversial, I suppose. But here's something that you weren't expecting or that you might have problems with, and but you're already connected to the character. But now you see that it's just another person who has this thing about them, who's gay or who was divorced or who whatever it is that you have a problem with. So I have no problem with it inherently, but I do agree that these things can be abused, and that's what Christopher? Was that his name? Christoph Cohen. That's what he was getting at. He was simply asking, let's just not go crazy with it. Like, you can tell a story, you can get a little political, but let's just not go crazy with it, please. I just want to tell the story. If you do the same type of political speech and discussions that you had in The Last of Us, I have no problem with that. It'll be a wonderful story and it'll be moving and incredible. But if it's the same type of thing as what Left Behind did, where it seemingly was like, well, I didn't even take it as that. It was so kind of like, oh, she's gay. And I was like, but I didn't take that as gay. I thought that I read that completely differently. No, she's gay. Oh, okay, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But like, okay, probably could have done it a little more subtly, or at least put some hints in the initial game if that's where you were always going to go with it. I don't know. I'm not a writer. I'm not the writer of The Last of Us, but I think it does bring up something interesting, which is just the idea of politics in video games. Some people say if you bring politics into art, it becomes propaganda. I could see where that's true, but I would also argue that propaganda is where art meets lies, I suppose, and deception, which is typically what propaganda tends to be. Depending on your definition, I would say propaganda tends to be where things start to become untrue. Otherwise, it's just kind of art. But I don't know. Many people would disagree with it. You could say that you know, a portrait of George Washington is propaganda, like patriotic propaganda. I wouldn't go that far. That's not really my definition of it, but whatever. That's beside the point. I don't know how we got on that from Neil Druckmann. But the idea of politics in narratives just in general, I have no problem with. The basic idea just being, if a story gets political and you don't like it or you disagree with it, either your beliefs are very shallow and very weak to the point where you can't handle an opposing point of view, which is pathetic. Like, you should be able to sit through a video game that's telling you stuff that you disagree with and be able to say, I disagree with that, but I enjoyed the game. Okay. Or, I disagree with that and that game sucked. And everyone that's saying that they loved it is lying because they agree with the political side. Think Ghostbusters. Nobody liked the movie Ghostbusters. Even like the most liberal person I know who was like, no, we need all movies to be all women. I'm not even misquoting or like exaggerating. She literally said, I think all movies should have females. Men are overrated. They've had their turn. Now it's women's turn. And she even said, well, like, I love that they had men be the stupid buffoons, and I love that, but, I mean, it wasn't a very good movie. And so, even when you're hardcore feminazi, she calls herself that, even when they are saying that your feminist propaganda push was a failure, that says something. But, I don't know. Politics in anything is going to get controversial, is going to get edgy. I feel bad for Christoph Cohen because he received so much hate as a result of asking a very decent question. There's no vulgarity in this. There's nothing bad about this. He says, The Last of Us is my favorite game of all time. Complimenting the guy he's tweeting to, saying, you created my favorite thing ever. And then he follows up saying, please try to keep your personal politics out of part 2. Please. He even said the magic word. Thank you very much. That's, it's like the nicest, sweetest way of wording that he could have possibly done. And this isn't an edited tweet or anything. This was before he deleted the tweet and then deleted his account, which is very sad that that's what he felt he needed to do. Because I would be like, I asked this question, Neil Druckmann said, Can't do it. I think politics are important. But no. Neil Druckmann's kind of followers on the Anita Sarkeesian side descended, sent him all sorts of death threats. I didn't get a screenshot of the death threats, but I did see at least 2 that he received. People saying, you're just a homophobic, transphobic, whatever, phobic, even though it's not really a fear. He's just asking for politics to stay out of his favorite piece of art of all time. But either way, interesting thing. Let me know what you think down below. I'm done. Another interesting thing that happened this week is that GameStop was caught asking their employees to lie to customers. Now, the idea behind this was essentially just that GameStop has a much larger profit margin on used games compared to new games. I mean, if they sell a game for $60, they're getting a tiny portion, whereas if they sell a used copy for $5 cheaper, they get to keep this much of it because they don't have to pay anything out to the developer. So naturally, they push used games. And their employees are apparently asked to do this. And so what all of these posts on NeoGAF and on Reddit essentially said, these were from GameStop employees, they said that they were being told by their managers, if somebody comes in, you know, they have certain quotas, say 30% of our sales need to be used games with relation to everything else. So if they haven't met their quota, then somebody comes in and says, do you have a new copy of Battlefield 1? And they said, well, no, we don't have any new copies, but we have used copies if you'd like one. It's only going to be like $5 less. And the guy says, nope, I want a new copy. Are you sure you don't have any new copies? And they would say, no, sorry. And then the guy would leave. They'd let him leave because they'd rather meet their quotas. And so they would actually lie to people. They'd take new copies off the shelf and put them in the back, and then they would only push the used copies. And I actually ran into this probably about a month and a half ago. It was when I actually purchased Dark Souls 3. It was probably the same week, I think about a week before. So maybe like a month and a half ago. And I was looking for my next game to do because I had finished Uncharted 4, I had finished Bloodborne, I had finished whatever else I have. I don't know. I had finished all the games that I had lined up, and I was like, okay, what am I doing next? What's my next game to work through? And I wanted to do Battlefield 1, like get an actual console version and just go at it. And so I was looking, and I went into the store, and I couldn't find any copies of the game. I couldn't find it at all. And I asked the employees, and they were very weird about it. I don't know. I got this weird vibe. I thought I was the problem, or I thought I was having some sort of weird stroke or something. But no, it just, this makes sense now because I kind of put it together that this is what was happening. They said they didn't have any new copies available. I should try coming back the next day or in a couple days. But you know, they're like, well, we don't have any readily available used copies, but we can set one aside for you so that the second that one comes in, we can get that. I said, well, why can't you do that with a new copy? If I'm only going to save like $5, like, why can't you do that with a new copy? Because again, normally I'd be like, okay, $5, I don't know. But I'd like to give the money to the developer. So I would like to buy a new game. If I'm only saving $5, I'd rather give that $5 to the developer to say, you made a good game. Have this $5. Pay for 30 minutes of one of your developer's time. More like 30 minutes of your secretary's time, I suppose. But nonetheless, I was like, you guys are being pretty weird about this. I don't see what the issue is. Like, why is this so weird to ask? But no, they were very weird about it. And now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. And I feel bad for the employees because they don't have a say in this. Their boss is telling them, you need to push this. And if somebody comes in looking for a new copy and you haven't met your quota, push them on a used copy. Say we don't have any new ones. Take the new ones off the shelf. That's what we need to do. Now, since then, GameStop's CEO has said that these are not indicative of the entire company and that it was disappointing. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less of the CEO. I mean, the CEO would say, a CEO who would come out and say, yes, we hate consumers and don't like giving them what they want. We're focused solely on these profits. Get over it, you stupid people. No CEO would ever say that, and so I'm not surprised that he came out and said this. But the fact that hundreds of employees have come out and said, no, they're forcing us to do this. It's bad. It's real bad. Just be warned. Be warned. Now I kind of put it together and I see. But now that everyone's aware, now that you're aware, if you're going into a used store, decide before you go in if you want to support the developer or if you want to support GameStop with a used copy. Usually, if I can get it for like half what the new copy is, I'll do a used copy if I really want the game. But if it's a $5 difference, a $10 difference, I'm like, you know what? That's like a cup of coffee. That's a meal at Chick-fil-A or something. I can do that. Give that to the developer. Show my support. But I don't know. I think it's more important to just be aware. They're not going to change how they deal with these types of things. So as long as we're aware, we can deal with it in a better way moving forward. I think that's the moral of the story. We can get all upset at GameStop, but if you just stop buying their used stuff, then they'll have to adapt. And I think that's kind of the moral of the story. It's too bad. GameStop has had issues with this in the past, but what are you going to do? Another thing that happened this week, New Vegas 2. This, I'm not even going to give much time to this because it's so absurd. New Vegas 2. Fallout New Vegas 2. There were rumors going around that they were working on a New Vegas 2. It was coming off of like Frag Hero or whatever the site was. And everyone was like, well, they have a really good track record for this. Now, if anybody wants a New Vegas 2, it would be me, or a follow-up Obsidian Fallout title. I think they do a much better job with the Fallout franchise than Bethesda does. But it's just so clearly not in the works. The Obsidian's CEO has come out and said, like, no, we love Fallout, but we're not working on it. We're not. It's up to Bethesda to let us, and we're focused on Pillars of Eternity too. And it's just wishful thinking. And Frag Hero, or whatever his name is, that website has been caught on multiple times. They said in the article, they're like, we correctly predicted all this stuff, and no one's laughing now. But this is what they do. They're like the psychic of the gaming community. What they do, not in a good way, what they do is they go and they say a ton of stuff. They make extremely broad predictions about everything so that when one of those things is slightly correct, they say, see, we predicted it and you all laughed at us. No, we just said 99% of what you're saying is horse bollocks, and we don't buy that. You clearly are milking this and being extremely dishonest or disingenuous with your predictions. You're just throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks. And they've also been caught, thank you to the archive, Internet Archive, whatever it's called, archive.net.org, something like that. Anyway, you can go back and you can look at their articles, and they've actually been caught altering their articles to fit better with what actually happened. So they predicted something with regard to the Red Dead Redemption 2 announcement gameplay, and they went back and they altered the article, changing the text to actually make it fit better with what actually ended up happening, which if you really had an inside source, you wouldn't need to do that because it would all be correct. But no, I think that they are liars and frauds. I'm not impressed with their track record or with what they do in general, and I'm no better, but at least I'm willing to admit that. But yeah, New Vegas 2, I want it to happen desperately, but Oblivion is in financial trouble. They've had to lay off a bunch of people, which some people are saying, well, they could do Pillars of Eternity 2 and Fallout New Vegas 2. Their staff is at about half of what it was during New Vegas. They have basically no money. They have a bunch of issues going on within the studio. It's just not looking good for Oblivion right now. And that's problem number one. Number two, with the lower staff, you can't really work on two projects at once. I would love for them to. I would love for them to come out at E3 and say, we've remastered New Vegas and we're coming out with a new version, Fallout New Orleans or something. I would love that. I would love it so much. But I just don't see how it's possible with their manpower, with their financial situation. I just don't see how it's possible. I'm trying to stay realistic here. As much as I want it, I want to get hyped, but I just don't see it in the stars. I'm bummed about it too. And last but not least, I want to talk about the game I finished this week, Dark Souls 3. If you did not see the vlog I put together, check it out in the description box below. I mean, it's just like a 2-minute thing. It just shows how close I was to dying at the very end in that boss battle against Soul of Cinder. But Basically, I finished the game. It took me 41 hours to do. That's going to be my game of the week. Again, I think it's been like week 3. I think it was also my game of the week. But I just finished it. I finally finished it, even in the midst of school and everything like that. And it was quite the experience. I'm proud of it. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as Bloodborne. I will say that. Parts of it I liked, parts of it I didn't. I still honestly think Bloodborne got it so right without the shield. I think the shield is probably the worst thing about Dark Souls. And some people will say, no, that's stupid. It's part of like the medieval theme of fighting, whatever. I think it's antithetical to the style of play necessary to have a good time and to enjoy and really excel in the Soulsborne series. I think with Dark Souls, you have to approach it a certain way. I think it was DH Bomber or Jonathan Adamson, I think it is, something like that. Jonathan Williams, maybe. I think that's what it is. But they both have YouTube channels and they've done videos on both. But they both pointed out that with the Soulsborne series, there is a right way to play it and there's a wrong way to play it. And there's the conservative way where you always have your shield up and you're just throwing your spear over and over. And that's going to kind of breed a very boring gameplay experience. You're going to have a bad time if you're doing that. Like, if you play with your shield up and spear, you're gonna have a bad time. It's true. It just is. You're gonna have a bad time. So you have to learn to play it a certain way, and Bloodborne actually teaches you how to play it that way, which is why I love Bloodborne so much. Now, Dark Souls 3 also seems to have a lot of... It seems to have been rushed in certain portions. I found multiple glitches. I found areas of the map where textures aren't there. So it's this weird gray magic-y looking surface and there's no texture on it. And it's not like I wasn't supposed to get there on the map. It's an area of the map where there's like a freaking Titanite shard there. But no, the texture just isn't there. There's also some glitches with some of the bosses where their strike zone is so massive, where it happens a lot with the hunter battles, unfortunately. But I mean, it's just the kind of hunter themed battles where they'll stab you, but you'll be over there, but you still get the damage from it. And so it really doesn't make any sense. A lot of it seems to have been rushed. Some of the bosses also seem to have been rushed. I don't know, there's just portions of the game which seem to have been just hastily thrown together. And it is a little disappointing. Now, don't get me wrong, Bloodborne also had a lot of these issues, and also had a lot of portions of the game which seemed to be missing or didn't seem to come together or connect. The first and most obvious one, to me at least, was in the very opening of Bloodborne when you fight the cleric beast. There's that massive gateway right behind it where you fight him, and after you fight him, the little lantern pops up and you can light it. But the gate never opens. Nothing ever happens there. I'm like, oh, okay. That seems like a really weird detail. Like, why didn't you just put it as a massive wall? Or maybe the bridge is broken so there's nowhere to go. Like, why was it so important to put this massive gate? And what I think probably happened is that it was initially intended that gate, or whatever, portcullis, whatever it would be, I think it was initially meant to connect to a later area of the game, but it doesn't. It just doesn't. And I think it was probably because it was rushed. I didn't really run into as many glitches except for the hunter battles, especially in the area when you're about to fight Rom. The hunter there is just a glitch fest, at least for me, in terms of strike zone and everything, damage zone. I don't know. Parts of these two last games seem to have been rushed, at least in certain portions, and I think that's probably due to the annualization of them, which is a reality. They have been putting out a new Soulsborne game for the last 2 or 3 years every year, and it looks like they're also going to do that again this year. They've said that there's going to be another game coming out this year, whether it's their mech franchise, one that's more in line, as they said, with fan expectations, or one that is in Miyazaki's words, weird. We don't know which one, but either way, it's exciting. But it's a very interesting thing. After you finish Bloodborne or Dark Souls, one of those games, you're like, I just need a break. You finish it, you set down the controller, you're like, Soul of Cinder, I just finished. Okay, I need to sleep, and then I need to go play Uncharted 4 or just something that's more feel good and relaxing and enjoyable. Like, those games are just so exhausting. They're so exhausting. Thankfully, Soul of Cinder, I don't know if you had more difficulty with Soul of Cinder as compared to I won't spoil it, but the final boss in Bloodborne, the final hunter boss, shall I say, let me know, because I found Soul of Cinder way easier than I found that guy. Way easier. I mean, the last boss in Bloodborne, without getting the 3 umbilical cords or whatever. The last boss in Bloodborne, I really struggled with. I think I spaced it out over like 3 days, where I would play for maybe an hour and a half, and then I'd go farm for another hour, trying to boost my stats or whatever. Then I'd come back and die again. Then I'd go to sleep and go to work, and then I'd come back and I'd try it again. It took me like 3 days to beat that final boss in Bloodborne. But with this guy, with Soul of Cinder, I got to him, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to do it tonight. I'm not going to do it tonight. I'll wait till tomorrow night. It's already getting late. So I put the controller down, closed it out, and then I came back the next day, and I was able to do it, I think, in like 5 attempts, maybe 4 or 5. And most of those attempts that failed were just trying to learn the patterns and the movements. But in general, I found him really easy. I don't know. Maybe I was too high of level, so it wasn't quite as fair as where they expect it to be. I don't know if 40 hours is typical for a playthrough, but I found him very easy. Maybe it just works with my play style. Maybe. I've talked to people who found the last boss in Bloodborne incredibly easy, but they found friggin' who was it? Which boss was it? Maybe it was Rom. I think it was Rom. Though they found like Rom incredibly difficult, but I found the opposite to be true. I don't know. Those games are weird because based on the play style, you can have an easy time or a hard time with certain bosses, and it's really interesting to see which is which. But I love the story in those. Like, I actually started thinking about it, and what's truly haunting about those stories, spoiler alert now, what's truly haunting about those stories is that the more you think about them, the worse it gets, and the more conflicted you become. And I kind of love that. I kind of love it. Like, the fact that you start thinking and you're just sitting there and you're like, oh, well, like the hunter's dream in Bloodborne. There's 3 possible endings to Bloodborne. I can either allow Gehrman to just execute me at the end of the game, and then I wake up anew and I've forgotten everything. Or I can fight him and resist, and I can fight him and kill Gehrman, and then I become the new kind of head of the hunter's dream. I take his place. Or I can find all the umbilical cords and then get taken over and become a young, great one. Like, there's 3 main options, and the more you think about them, the more difficult it becomes to choose. Because, like, you've spent this entire game discovering new things about the world, but to wake up and forget everything you've learned would be, at first, it's like, yes, I don't want to remember this stuff. But at the same time, you're forgetting everything that you've been enlightened to. And that, I mean, ignorance is bliss, I suppose. But at the same time, you don't want to forget everything that you've done. So that's a bad ending at the same time, but it's also weirdly happy. Which is one of the interesting things. Like, usually the easiest ending is the bad ending, and the hardest ending to get is the best ending. And it's also true for Bloodborne, because the easiest ending to get is to refuse, or to give in and to be executed, and then you wake up and you've forgotten everything. Or you can just go through and you can friggin' fight Gehrman, but Gehrman has been there for who knows how long, hundreds of years possibly, and he's a very old man. He's not allowed to die, but he's there and he's trying to head up the hunter's dream, and he doesn't want you to experience this curse. Like, you can hear him talking to himself when he's like at certain times in the hunter's dream, and he's saying stuff like that he wants to die, he wants to be released and everything. But instead of just giving you an easy fight and like, oh no, I died, no, he fights his butt off and kills you probably 99% of the time, just so that he can spare you. So even the final boss is trying to be selfless in giving you this kind of out, saying, no, you don't want to do this. You don't want to be the new hunter of the hunter's dream. It's a curse. You don't want this. But no, he even then is in service to the Great One, and so he goes and he gets up out of his wheelchair and he fights the crap out of you, and it's great. And it's something that you don't think of initially, and you can go through those games and have a great time just fighting and just wreaking havoc. But if you sit down and you actually think about what's going on, if you think about the story and what these characters are doing, you actually have a new appreciation for it, because like, same thing with Ram seems to try to give you ins and not fight necessarily as hard as he could to try to almost help you. Gehrman, same sort of thing, but on the same token, he also doesn't want you to take his place because he knows how horrible it is. So he's willing to kill you to save you, even though him dying is what he actually wants. It's so cool. It's so cool. The more you think about it, the more you appreciate it. And if you don't know anything about the Bloodborne lore, I recommend that you look it up. Just go to the wiki and start reading it, or Vati Vidya or something, I think is his name, on YouTube. He's got amazing videos on the lore. It's intense. It is intense, and it will make you appreciate those games even more, which is why I'm so hoping we get a Bloodborne 2 this fall, which I think is very, very possible. I think it's very possible. Looks like the Souls series is done. There's been conflicting reports and conflicting statements from the creators, but nonetheless, it seems probably to be done. But Bloodborne looks like it was a huge success, so I don't know why they wouldn't make a sequel. I would love a Bloodborne sequel. But with all that said, guys, that's all I have to say. Dark Souls 3, my game of the week. Really enjoy it. I could talk about it forever, but I'm not going to. Let me know what your game of the week is. Hashtag game of the week down in the comment section below or on Twitter. Can't hurt. And if you want to support this show, which is ad-free on Patreon, please feel free to do so. Links in the description box below. Don't feel obligated to, but if you do, there's all sorts of reward rankings and stuff based on how much you pledge to give. And some of those rewards are really, really freaking cool. So I think you should check those out. But with all that said, guys, thank you for watching, honestly and truly. I love each and every single one of you more than you could possibly know, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Peace out.